You have no idea who her mother really is, do you? The words echoed in Ethan Cole's mind long before he ever stepped foot inside that house, but at the time, he didn't know why they felt so heavy, like something waiting to fall. It started on an ordinary afternoon, the kind that smelled like motor oil and sun-warmed asphalt, where time moved slow and predictable, where nothing extraordinary was supposed to happen. Ethan wiped his hands on a worn rag, the grease staining deeper into the fabric like the years had stained into his life, quiet, steady, unremarkable, when Lily Harper walked in, soft footsteps against the concrete, her presence always a little out of place in a shop like his. "My mom wants to see you," she said, her voice calm, almost too calm, and for a moment, Ethan thought he misheard her. "Your mom?" he asked, glancing up, half smiling like it was a joke he hadn't quite caught yet. Lily nodded, her eyes holding his just a second longer than usual, not playful, not uncertain, something else, something measured. "Tonight," she added. The garage seemed to pause around them, the distant hum of a passing truck stretching thin, the ceiling fan clicking overhead like it was counting down to something neither of them said out loud. Ethan let out a short breath. "Look, if this is about the repair last week, I told you, it wasn't a big deal," he said, shrugging it off the way he always did, the way a man learns to shrink his own worth until it fits comfortably into silence. Lily didn't smile. "It's not about the car," she replied. 3 words. Simple. Direct. But they didn't explain anything, and somehow that made them heavier. Ethan leaned back against the workbench, folding his arms, studying her now, really studying her, noticing the way she stood like someone who was used to being listened to, even in places where no one should know her name. "Then what is it about?" he asked. Lily hesitated, just for a breath, just long enough for the air to shift. "She just wants to meet you," she said, softer this time. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly above them, filling the silence with something artificial, something that made everything feel slightly unreal. Ethan nodded slowly, more out of politeness than understanding. "All right," he said. "Where?" Lily reached into her bag, pulling out a small piece of paper, placing it on the counter between them like it meant something more than an address. Ethan glanced down, and for the first time, something in his chest tightened. The location wasn't just unfamiliar. It didn't belong to his world. Not even close. He looked back up at her, brow furrowing. "You sure you've got the right guy?" he asked, a quiet edge of disbelief creeping in. Lily met his gaze without flinching. "I'm sure," she said. No hesitation. No doubt. Just certainty. Outside, a breeze pushed through the open garage door, carrying the faint scent of rain that hadn't arrived yet, the kind of air that always came before something changed. Ethan picked up the paper, folding it once, carefully, like he was holding onto something fragile without knowing why. "Tonight," he repeated. Lily nodded. "Tonight." And for reasons he couldn't explain, reasons that had nothing to do with curiosity and everything to do with something deeper, quieter, he said yes, not knowing that by the time the night was over, silence would mean something entirely different. The address stayed in Ethan Cole's pocket all afternoon, folded once, then unfolded, then folded again like a question he could not quite answer, and even as he finished tightening bolts and closing out the last repair ticket of the day, his mind kept drifting back to it, to the way Lily Harper had said tonight with a calm that did not match the request, as if she already knew he would say yes before he ever spoke. "You heading out early?" His co-worker Mike called from across the shop, wiping down a hood with a rag that had seen better years, and Ethan hesitated for just a second. "Something like that," he replied, keeping his tone even, because explaining it would make it sound stranger than it already felt. Mike smirked. "Got yourself a date?" Ethan shook his head, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "Not exactly." That should have been the end of it, but it was not. Because as the garage lights dimmed and the late afternoon sun stretched long shadows across the concrete floor, something about the day refused to settle back into normal. Ethan locked up, the metal door clanging shut behind him with a hollow echo, and for a moment he just stood there, keys in hand, staring at nothing in particular, feeling that quiet pressure again, like the air before a storm that had not yet arrived. He climbed into his old pickup truck, the engine turning over with a familiar rumble, and as he pulled onto the road, the world around him looked the same diners, the same gas stations, the same worn sidewalks, but it felt different, like he was already stepping out of it without realizing. At a red light, he reached into his pocket and pulled out the paper again, smoothing it against the steering wheel, reading the address slowly this time, making sure he had not misunderstood it earlier, but the numbers did not change, and neither did what they implied. "You sure you have got the right guy?" he murmured under his breath, repeating his own question from before, but this time there was no one there to answer it. The light turned green, and he drove on. By the time he reached home, the sky had begun to shift into that soft gold that only lasted a few minutes, the kind that made everything look gentler than it really was, and inside, the quiet greeted him the way it always did, steady, familiar, grounded. His daughter Emily sat at the small kitchen table, her homework spread out in careful rows, pencil tapping lightly against the page. "You are late," she said without looking up. "Just a little," Ethan replied, setting his keys down, his voice softening in a way it never did anywhere else. She glanced up then, studying him the way children do, noticing things adults think they hide. "Everything okay?" she asked. Ethan paused, just for a second, then nodded. "Yeah," he said. "Just got somewhere to be tonight." Emily tilted her head slightly. "Important?" she asked. He considered the question, the weight of it, the truth he did not fully understand yet. "I think so," he said finally. Dinner was simple, quiet, the kind of routine that had held their lives together for years, and yet even in that familiarity, something had shifted, something small but undeniable, like a note played just slightly out of tune. Later, as the clock ticked closer to the time Lily had given him, Ethan stood by the door, jacket in hand, staring at the paper one last time, the address now etched into his mind whether he wanted it there or not. Emily watched him from the hallway. "You look nervous," she said. Ethan let out a soft breath, almost a laugh, but not quite. "I am not," he replied. Then he paused, adjusting his jacket, his eyes drifting toward the door like it might open on its own. "I just do not know what I am walking into." And as he stepped outside, the night air cooler now, quieter, carrying that same faint promise of change, the kind that does not ask for permission, he realized something simple, something steady, something true. Whatever waited at that address, it was already too late to turn back. The road narrowed the further Ethan drove, the familiar glow of streetlights giving way to long stretches of darkness broken only by distant porch lamps and the occasional passing car, and with every mile, the address in his mind felt less like a destination and more like a threshold he had already crossed. "You are overthinking this," he muttered quietly, adjusting his grip on the steering wheel, trying to settle the unease that had followed him since he left home, but the truth was, nothing about tonight felt simple anymore. He turned onto a private road just as his navigation instructed, the tires of his truck crunching softly over smooth gravel that looked too carefully maintained to belong to anyone ordinary, and then he saw it, not all at once, but in pieces, first the iron gate standing tall and silent, then the long driveway stretching beyond it, lined with evenly spaced lights that cast a soft golden path into the distance. Ethan slowed the truck to a stop, the engine idling low as he stared ahead. "This cannot be right," he said under his breath, glancing once more at the address, but the numbers matched, every single one of them. Before he could question it further, the gate began to open, slow and deliberate, as if it had already been expecting him. He did not press a button. He did not speak to anyone. It simply opened. Ethan exhaled slowly, his chest tightening just slightly as he eased his foot back onto the gas pedal and drove forward, crossing the line without fully understanding why. The driveway curved gently, revealing more of the property with every second, manicured lawns stretching wide under soft lighting, trees trimmed with precision, and finally, the house itself rising into view, large, elegant, impossibly still, like it had been placed there rather than built. He parked near the front, the engine cutting off with a quiet finality that made the silence around him feel even heavier. For a moment, he stayed seated, hands resting on the wheel, eyes fixed on the front door, as if waiting for something to explain itself before he stepped out. Nothing did. So he opened the door and got out. his boots touched the stone driveway, the sound sharper than expected in the stillness, and as he walked toward the entrance, he became aware of every small detail, the way the lights did not flicker, the way the air felt cooler here, cleaner somehow, the faint scent of something expensive he could not name. He reached the door, raising his hand to knock, but before his knuckles touched the surface, it opened. Lily stood there, just as calm as before, just as composed, like this was exactly how it was supposed to happen. "You made it," she said. Ethan gave a small nod, his eyes briefly scanning past her into the house, catching glimpses of polished floors, soft lighting, space that felt too quiet to be empty but too still to be alive. "I almost did not," he admitted. Lily stepped aside, allowing him in without another word. As he crossed the threshold, something shifted, subtle but undeniable, like the world outside had closed behind him without asking. The door shut softly. No echo. No sound beyond the faint hum of the house itself. "This way," Lily said, her voice steady, leading him further inside, her footsteps light, measured, controlled. Ethan followed, his gaze moving from one detail to another, the framed artwork, the wide hallways, the kind of space that did not just suggest wealth, it confirmed it without needing to say anything at all. "Lily," he said quietly, just enough to break the silence between them. She glanced back. "Yeah?" He hesitated, searching for the right words, something that would ground the moment back into something understandable. "What does your mother want with me?" Lily slowed slightly, just for a step, then continued walking, her expression unreadable. "You will see," she replied. 3 words again. Simple. Controlled. But this time, they did not feel like an answer. They felt like a warning. And somewhere deeper in the house, beyond the quiet and the polished walls, a presence waited, unseen but certain, like the night itself was holding its breath for what would happen next. They entered a wide dining room where the light softened into a warm, controlled glow, the kind that made everything look composed, intentional, and slightly distant from reality, and at the far end of the table, seated with perfect posture and stillness, was Victoria Harper. She did not stand immediately, she did not rush to greet him, she simply looked up, her eyes steady, assessing, as if she had already formed an opinion before he walked through the door. "You are Ethan Cole," she said, her voice calm, precise, carrying just enough authority to quiet the room even further. Ethan gave a small nod, stopping a few steps from the table, unsure whether to approach or wait. "Yes," he replied, his tone respectful but grounded, the way a man speaks when he knows exactly who he is, even if he does not know where he stands. Victoria gestured lightly toward the chair across from her. "Sit," she said. No smile. No softness. Just instruction. Ethan glanced briefly at Lily, who had already taken a place off to the side, watching, not interfering, her expression unreadable. Then he pulled out the chair and sat down, careful, measured, aware of every small movement as if the room itself were observing him. "Thank you for coming," Victoria continued, folding her hands neatly on the table, her gaze never leaving him. Ethan nodded again. "Your daughter said you wanted to meet me," he said, choosing his words carefully, not rushing, not filling the silence unnecessarily. "I did," Victoria replied. A pause followed, not awkward, but deliberate, like she was giving the moment time to settle before deciding what came next. "Tell me," she said finally, leaning back slightly, "how long have you been running that garage?" Ethan exhaled quietly, the question simple, almost ordinary, but the way she asked it made it feel like more than conversation. "About 9 years," he answered. "Before that?" she asked. "Different jobs," he said. "Nothing worth putting on a resume." Victoria's eyes narrowed just slightly, not in judgment, but in focus. "And your daughter?" she asked. "Emily," Ethan said, the name coming easier, warmer. "She is 8. Victoria nodded slowly, as if noting something down in a place no one else could see. "You raise her alone," she said. It was not a question. Ethan held her gaze. "Yes." 3 exchanges. Simple. Direct. But the air between them tightened with each one, like a quiet test neither had agreed to out loud. The faint sound of silverware being placed somewhere in the room echoed briefly, then disappeared, leaving only the low hum of silence again. Victoria reached for a glass of water, taking a small sip, her movements controlled, precise, then she set it down and looked at him again. "My daughter tells me you refused payment," she said. Ethan shrugged slightly. "It was a small repair," he replied. "It did not feel right charging for 10 minutes of work." Victoria tilted her head, studying him more closely now. "Most people would not say that," she said. Ethan did not respond immediately. He did not rush to explain himself. Instead, he let the silence sit, the way he had learned to do over the years, the way silence often said more than words ever could. Lily shifted slightly in her chair, watching him now with a different kind of attention, not curiosity, not surprise, something quieter, something closer to respect. Victoria leaned forward just a fraction, her voice lowering, not in volume, but in tone. "Do you always do what feels right, Mr. Cole?" she asked, "even when it costs you something?" Ethan met her gaze without hesitation. "Especially then," he said. 2 sentences. No embellishment. No defense. Just truth. The room seemed to still completely, the air itself pausing as if it had been waiting for that answer, and for the first time since he had entered the house, something in Victoria's expression shifted, subtle, almost invisible, but there, a flicker of something that was not control, not authority, but recognition. And somewhere in that silence, something unseen began to change. The silence that followed did not break quickly, it stretched, settled, and deepened, like the room itself was absorbing Ethan's words and deciding what to do with them, and for a moment no one spoke, not Victoria, not Lily, not even the quiet presence of the house that seemed to listen from every corner. Then Victoria leaned back slightly, her fingers resting against the edge of the table, her expression composed once more but no longer distant in the same way. "Dinner is ready," she said simply. The words were not an invitation, they were a transition, a shift in tone that carried them all into the next part of the evening without asking if they were ready. A server entered quietly, placing plates with precise movements, the soft clink of porcelain against the table echoing gently before fading again into stillness. Ethan watched without staring, his posture steady, his presence grounded, even as everything around him reminded him that he did not belong in this world. "You are not uncomfortable," Victoria observed, her voice calm, her eyes studying him again. It was not quite a question, but it left space for one. Ethan picked up his glass, taking a small sip before answering. "I am aware," he said. Victoria's brow lifted slightly. "Of what?" she asked. "Of where I am," Ethan replied. "And where I am not." 3 sentences. Clear. Direct. No apology. No pretense. Lily looked at him then, really looked, as if she had expected hesitation, or uncertainty, but found none, only that same quiet steadiness that had first caught her attention. Victoria nodded once, slowly, as if acknowledging something that had just been confirmed. The meal continued in a rhythm that felt almost rehearsed, questions asked with intention, answers given without excess, each exchange revealing something small, something precise. "You turned down a management offer 2 years ago," Victoria said at one point, her tone unchanged. Ethan paused, his fork hovering briefly before he set it down. "Yes," he said. "Why?" she asked. "It would have taken me away from my daughter," he replied. Victoria tilted her head slightly. "It would have doubled your income." Ethan met her gaze. "It would have halved my time with her." A quiet answer. A firm one. The kind that did not ask to be agreed with. Lily's eyes softened, just slightly, her posture relaxing in a way that had not happened since he arrived. The room dimmed further as the evening deepened, the lights adjusting almost imperceptibly, casting longer shadows along the walls, the outside world disappearing into darkness beyond the tall windows. And then, as if the night itself had decided something, a distant rumble of thunder rolled across the sky, low and steady. Victoria glanced toward the window, then back at Ethan. The storm will be heavy, she said. Ethan nodded, following her gaze for a moment. Looks like it, he replied. Another pause. Another shift. Victoria placed her napkin neatly beside her plate. It would not be wise for you to drive back in that, she said. Ethan hesitated, just for a fraction of a second, not out of fear, but out of habit, the instinct to decline anything that felt too generous, too out of place. I will manage, he said. Victoria shook her head once, gently but firmly. No, she replied. You will stay. The words were calm, but they carried weight, not pressure, not command, but certainty, like a decision that had already been made beyond him. Lily spoke then, her voice softer than before. There is a guest room, she said. It is already prepared. Ethan looked between them, the storm outside building slowly, the quiet inside holding steady, and something in him recognized the moment for what it was, not an inconvenience, not an accident, but a continuation of something that had started the moment he said yes earlier that day. He exhaled slowly, setting his glass down with care. All right, he said. One word. No resistance. No question. And somewhere beyond the walls, the rain began to fall, soft at first, then steady, then certain, as if the night itself had decided he was not leaving. The guest room was quiet in a way that felt intentional, not empty, not forgotten, but prepared, as if someone had already imagined him there long before he agreed to stay, and as Ethan stepped inside, the soft glow of a bedside lamp cast warm light across neatly folded sheets, untouched surfaces, and a window that looked out into the rain now falling steady and calm against the glass. If you need anything, just let me know, Lily said from the doorway, her voice gentle but distant, like she was careful not to interrupt something larger than the moment itself. Ethan nodded once. I will be fine, he replied. She hesitated for a brief second, her hand resting lightly against the frame, as if she wanted to say more, but chose not to, and then she stepped back, the door closing softly behind her without a sound. Ethan stood still for a moment, his eyes moving slowly across the room, taking in the details, the kind of details that did not belong to chance, the kind that suggested planning, precision, intent. He set his jacket over the chair, his movements measured, unhurried, then walked toward the window, watching the rain trace thin lines down the glass, each drop catching the light before disappearing into the dark below. The house remained quiet, but not silent. There was a faint hum beneath everything, something subtle, almost mechanical, like a system running unseen behind the walls. Ethan frowned slightly, not in discomfort, but in awareness, the kind that comes from years of noticing what others ignore. He stepped back from the window and moved toward the hallway, opening the door just enough to listen, not intruding, just observing. The corridor stretched long and still, lit by soft recessed lights that did not flicker, did not buzz, did not falter. He walked slowly, his footsteps muted against the polished floor, passing framed photographs arranged with perfect spacing, each one capturing moments that felt curated rather than casual, Lily at different ages, Victoria in settings that hinted at power without naming it, large gatherings, formal events, places Ethan had only seen on television or in passing headlines. He paused in front of one frame, studying it more closely, Lily standing beside a group of people dressed in suits, their posture confident, their expressions controlled, and behind them, a building with glass walls stretching into the sky, familiar in a way that made his chest tighten slightly. That is from last year, Lily's voice came from behind him, calm, steady, but closer now. Ethan turned, not startled, just aware. Corporate event, he asked. Lily nodded. Something like that, she said. 3 words again. Measured. Limited. But this time, Ethan did not look away from her so quickly. Your mother runs something big, he said, not a question, not quite a statement, just an observation placed carefully between them. Lily held his gaze, her expression unreadable for a moment longer than before. She does, she replied. The air between them shifted slightly, not tense, not relaxed, but clearer, like a layer had been removed without being acknowledged. Ethan nodded slowly, glancing back at the photograph, then down the hallway, then back at her. And I am here because of a 10-minute repair, he said quietly. Lily stepped a little closer, her voice lowering just enough to match the stillness around them. "You are here because of who you are," she said. A simple sentence. But it did not answer anything. It deepened everything. Ethan studied her for a second, searching for something that felt grounded, something that explained the scale of what he was beginning to sense, but there was none. Just that same calm certainty in her eyes. The lights dimmed slightly as the night deepened, the storm outside steady now, consistent, wrapping the house in a quiet isolation that felt less like weather and more like design. Ethan exhaled slowly, his voice even when he spoke again. "Then I guess I am missing something," he said. Lily did not respond immediately. She just looked at him, the silence stretching just long enough to matter, before she finally spoke. "You are not missing it," she said softly. "You just have not been told yet." And somewhere in that quiet hallway, with the rain falling and the house holding its breath, the realization settled in deeper than before. This night was not unfolding by chance, it was unfolding by choice, just not his. Ethan did not return to the guest room right away. Instead, he remained in that hallway, standing between polished silence and unanswered questions, his eyes drifting once more across the framed photographs. But now he was no longer just observing, he was connecting, noticing the repetition, the pattern, the way the same faces appeared beside Victoria in different cities, different settings, always composed, always controlled, always important. "These are not just events," he said quietly, more to himself than to Lily. She did not correct him. She did not explain. She simply watched him arrive at the edge of understanding on his own. "No," she replied after a moment. "They are not." 3 words again. But this time, they felt heavier, like they were carrying something she had been holding back all evening. Ethan exhaled slowly, his hands resting at his sides, his posture still calm, but something inside him had shifted, not fear, not confusion, but clarity beginning to take shape. "Your mother knew about me before the car," he said, turning his gaze back to her, not accusing, not defensive, just stating what now felt obvious. Lily did not answer immediately. The silence stretched between them, not uncomfortable, but deliberate, like she was deciding how much truth the moment could carry. Then she nodded once. "Yes," she said. The word landed without resistance. No denial. No hesitation. Just confirmation. Ethan looked down briefly, processing, then back up again. "For how long?" he asked. Lily drew in a quiet breath, her eyes steady, but softer now, less guarded. "Long enough," she replied. "Not a number. Not a timeline. Just enough to make the meaning clear." The hallway seemed to grow stiller around them, the soft lighting holding its place, the rain outside continuing its steady rhythm against the glass like a background pulse to everything unfolding inside. Ethan took a step forward, not closing the distance completely, but enough to show he was no longer standing on the outside of the conversation. "So this was not about 10 minutes in a garage," he said. Lily shook her head gently. "No," she said. Another pause. Then, more carefully, "It was about what you did without knowing who I was." That sentence did not just explain. It reframed everything. Ethan let it settle, not rushing to respond, not pushing back, just allowing the truth to take its place. "And if I had known?" he asked. Lily met his eyes, her answer immediate this time. "Then it would not have meant the same." Silence followed. Real silence. The kind that does not need to be filled. Somewhere deeper in the house, a door closed softly, a distant sound that barely touched the moment, but marked that something was moving, something was approaching. Ethan glanced down the corridor, then back at Lily. "Your mother is testing me," he said. It was not a question anymore. Lily held his gaze, and for the first time, there was no distance left in her expression, only honesty. "She is trying to understand you," she corrected. A subtle difference. But a meaningful one. The air shifted again, lighter now, clearer, as if the truth, once spoken, had removed the weight that silence alone could not carry. Ethan nodded slowly, absorbing it, accepting it without resistance. "And what are you trying to do?" he asked. Lily hesitated, just for a second, just long enough to make the answer matter. The same thing, she said. 3 words. But this time, they were not guarded. They were open. And somewhere beyond them, at the far end of the hallway, a figure appeared, Victoria stepping forward into the light, her presence quiet but unmistakable, her gaze already fixed on Ethan, not with judgment this time, not with distance, but with something else entirely, something closer to decision. And in that moment, Ethan understood something simple, something steady, something undeniable. This night was no longer about being invited in. It was about whether he belonged. Victoria did not speak immediately when she stepped into the light, she simply walked forward with measured steps, her presence steady, controlled, the kind of presence that did not demand attention but received it anyway, and when she stopped a few feet from Ethan, the silence between them felt different now, no longer distant, no longer testing, but deliberate, like the moment before something final is said. "You are observant," she said at last, her voice calm, lower than before, not for secrecy, but for clarity. Ethan gave a small nod, his posture unchanged, his expression steady. "I pay attention," he replied. 3 words. Simple. But they carried the same quiet weight they always had. Victoria studied him for a moment longer, then glanced briefly toward Lily, not for permission, not for approval, but as if acknowledging that whatever came next was no longer hers alone to decide. Then she looked back at him. "You are correct," she said. "We knew about you before tonight." Ethan did not react outwardly. He did not step back, did not question the statement, did not interrupt. He simply listened. Victoria continued, her tone even, precise. "Not your finances. Not your status. Not the things most people measure." A pause. "We looked at your choices." The word settled slowly, deliberately, each one placing itself exactly where it needed to be. Ethan's gaze did not waver. "Why?" he asked. No accusation. No edge. Just a question that deserved an answer. Victoria drew in a quiet breath, her hands resting loosely at her sides now, less formal, less guarded. "Because influence," she said, "is not something we lack." Another pause. "Character is." 3 sentences. Direct. Unembellished. Lily stepped slightly closer, not interrupting, but standing within the moment now rather than beside it. The hallway remained still, the soft lighting holding steady, the rain outside continuing its quiet rhythm, like the world beyond the walls had stepped back to let this conversation unfold without interruption. Ethan nodded once, slowly, absorbing the meaning without resistance. "So this is an interview," he said. Victoria shook her head gently. "No," she replied. "An interview assumes you are trying to be chosen." She held his gaze. "You are not." That distinction hung in the air, subtle but undeniable. Ethan exhaled softly, the faintest hint of a smile touching his expression, not from amusement, but from recognition. "And yet I am still here," he said. Victoria's lips curved just slightly, the smallest shift, almost imperceptible. "Yes," she said. "You are." Silence followed again, but it no longer carried uncertainty. It carried understanding. Lily looked between them, her expression no longer guarded, no longer distant, but open in a way that had not been present earlier in the night. "You helped me without asking who I was," she said quietly. Ethan glanced at her. "You needed help," he replied. That was enough. 3 sentences. No hesitation. No qualification. Just truth. Victoria watched him closely now, not measuring, not testing, but confirming something that had already begun to take shape long before he arrived. "Most people," she said slowly, "help when they believe it will matter." She paused, letting the word settle. "You helped when it did not." Ethan did not respond immediately. He did not rush to fill the silence. Instead, he let it remain, steady, grounded, the way he always had. Then, after a moment, he spoke. "It mattered," he said. Victoria tilted her head slightly. How? She asked. Ethan's answer came without delay. To her, he said, glancing briefly at Lily. That is enough. And in that moment, something shifted completely, not in the room, not in the lighting, not in the quiet rhythm of the rain, but in the space between them, where judgment had once been, where distance had once lived, now replaced by something simpler, something stronger, something that did not need to be named. Victoria held his gaze, her expression still, composed, but no longer guarded, and when she spoke again, her voice carried a different tone, not authority, not control, but respect. There is something you should know, she said. The words were calm, measured, but they carried the weight of everything that had led to this moment. And as the house stood silent around them, as the night held steady beyond the glass, Ethan understood that whatever came next would not change who he was, but it might change everything else. Victoria did not rush the moment, she allowed the silence to settle fully before she spoke again, as if she understood that what came next would not need force, only clarity, and when she finally lifted her gaze to meet Ethan's, there was no distance left in it, no test, no barrier, only truth. We have spent years building something that most people will never understand, she said, her voice calm, steady, but softer than before, as if she was no longer speaking from position, but from purpose. Ethan remained still, listening, not interrupting, not reacting, just present in the way he had been all night. Companies, influence, networks, she continued, they grow easily when you have resources. A brief pause. But trust does not. 3 sentences. Measured. Intentional. Lily stood beside her now, not behind, not separate, her posture aligned with her mother in a way that had not been visible before, not as power, but as unity. Victoria stepped slightly closer, not invading space, but closing distance just enough to make what she said next undeniable. My daughter has met many people, she said. Successful people. Educated people. Impressive people. Another pause. None of them stayed consistent when they thought no one was watching. The words did not accuse. They revealed. Ethan exhaled quietly, his eyes steady, his posture unchanged, absorbing the weight of what she was saying without shifting who he was in response to it. And you think I did, he said. It was not pride. It was not disbelief. It was simply acknowledgement. Victoria nodded once. We know you did, she replied. The distinction mattered. Lily's voice followed, softer but certain. You did not ask who I was, she said. You did not try to gain anything. Ethan glanced at her briefly, then back to Victoria. I was not looking for anything, he said. 3 words at the core of it. Truth. Victoria studied him for a long moment, the kind of look that no longer measured, but confirmed. Then she spoke again, and this time, her voice carried something different, something final. There is an opportunity in front of you, she said. Not a job. Not a contract. A pause. A place. The words settled between them, quiet but heavy with meaning. Ethan did not respond immediately. He did not lean forward. He did not ask for details. Instead, he let the silence exist, the way he always had, the way silence often revealed more than any question could. Then he spoke. You have everything you need, he said. Victoria's expression shifted slightly, not disagreement, not confusion, but curiosity. Not everything, she replied. Ethan met her gaze fully now, his voice even, grounded, unchanged from the man who had walked into the garage that morning. You have everything except certainty, he said. Lily's eyes widened just slightly, not from shock, but from recognition, like a truth she had felt but never named had just been spoken out loud. Victoria remained still, her composure intact, but something deeper in her expression softened, something that did not belong to power, but to understanding. And you believe you offer that, she said. Ethan shook his head gently. No, he replied. I do not offer anything. A brief pause. I just do not change depending on who is standing in front of me. The words were quiet. Simple. but they carried the weight of everything he was. And then, for the first time since the night began, no one spoke. Not Lily. Not Victoria. Not even the quiet hum of the house seemed to matter anymore. The rain continued outside, steady, consistent, unchanged, just like the man standing in the center of that moment. And in that silence, something became clear without needing to be said. Respect had replaced evaluation, truth had replaced assumption, and whatever decision had been forming throughout the night had already been made. Not by them, but by him.